what made you fascinated in learning about happiness in the first place? Were you just not a happy person? Were you the happy person that no one else around you was? What was the reason?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. I think the interest in the happiness was twofold. Part of it started in my role at Yale. So I live on campus with students. I'm a head of college. So Yale's one of these strange schools like Hogwarts, where there's like Gryffindor and Slytherin and these like weird colleges within a college, right? So I'm head of Silliman College, no relation to Slytherin, despite the kind of similar soundingness. But that means I like hang out with students on a regular basis.
Wow.
And what
So
I
you're like
was
a big
seeing,
sister almost.
kinda, yeah, like an aunt. I call myself
Like
the
an
benevolent
aunt.
aunt. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm too old. I'm too old to be the sister, sadly. But yeah, so living with them, I got really up close and personal with the so-called mental health crisis that we're seeing among our young
Ah.
people.
Mhm.
I mean, the stats nationally are just staggering. So over 40% of current day college students report being too depressed to function most days. Over 65% say that they're lonely or overwhelmingly anxious. Over 80% say that they spend most days feeling overwhelmed by all they have to do. It's just really tough right now. And so the interest in the happiness science came out of that, which is, I'm part of this community where I'm like, again, they're a benevolent aunt, and I'm seeing them, not be able to function because they're too stressed out about their midterm, or just like having panic attacks about their summer internship applications. And I'm like, somebody needs to do something about this to
Like
help
we're
this.
teaching them how to be overwhelmed with science and math and all these and psychology, but they're too overwhelmed to actually take it in. And if they're stressed and mentally unwell, what's the point of it all? It sounds like
Exactly. We act like we're being educators and we're teaching them like computer science and Chaucer and Shakespeare and all this stuff. And it's like, none of that's going in
they're not happy.
yeah, they're just, or if that they're that mentally distressed. Maybe if
And,
you're having like a not perfect day, great. But,
right.
if 60% of if 2/3 of the kids in my class are overwhelmingly anxious during that class, like, we're not educating our students in the way we thought. And so,
It's hard to receive information and remember and assimilate the information when you're under extreme mental stress and emotional trauma, or even if it's not real and it's made up trauma, it's still hard to remember things and test well and write great essays. It's really challenging under that type of mental stress, right?
yeah, I mean, like simulate, if your listeners could simulate the last time they were feeling overwhelmingly anxious, like, was that an awesome productivity day? Like, did you learn a bunch that day? Were you
No,
on your best? Like, no, right? And
I'm
so,
eating donuts and cookies and just watching Netflix, right?
exactly. And so I wanted to do something about it. But on your question about, am I a naturally happy person? I feel like, if I'm being honest, the other part of that story was, I wasn't feeling like I was flourishing at the time. I'm looking at these students feeling anxious, and I could say, I'm stressed about work. I'm worried about publications. I'm not doing the stuff that I need to do to be happy
Mm,
either. And so part of me was excited to teach my students this class, because I figured, I get to practice what I preach, right? Like, once I learn this stuff, I'm supposed to be an example to them about doing this
hmm.
stuff right. And so it's kind of a little, selfish too. And so
So
basically I just
when did
retrained.
this start? When you were like, okay, I want to learn about this and retrain myself for
Yeah,
happiness?
so this was like early in, I started as head of college in 2016. And I'd say like basically through 2017 or so, I started
Mm,
reading more about this stuff. And in January of 2018, I hit go on this new class. I basically threw together all this material and created a new class for the students at Yale, where you learn about kind of the science of what makes you happy, misconceptions we have about happiness, like money and the stuff we were just
yeah,
talking about, but also how to put those things into practice. Because it's one thing to know what you're supposed to do, but it's another to like
yeah,
actually do it, as you probably know,
of
and I'm
course.
sure you talk about a lot in the podcast quite well. So yeah, so at the time I didn't know what was going to happen. It was a new class at an Ivy League school, so I thought, 30 or 40 kids will take it. You could imagine my surprise when we get this wonderful little tool on Yale where we can see how many students are looking at our class. They don't register ahead of time, so they're kind of only show up that first day of class. And most of the classes had a scale from 0 to 100 students, but mine had this weird scale that was different than all the other classes, where it went from 0 to 1,000 students.
Oh my
I was like,
goodness.
that's weird. And what wound up happening is we got around 1,200 students who
You're
took
taking
the
over the
class.
basketball arena.
Well, that we actually, like, we joked about, taking over the football stadium. In the end, we taught the class in a concert hall on the big, this is like where
Wow.
Yo-Yo Ma plays when he comes to Yale's campus. And there's
Wow.
me
How many people
teaching those
showed up?
guys. Just under 1,200, which just for
Wow.
reference is like about 1 out of every 4 students at Yale took the class.
Wow. And now is this underclass? Is this upperclassmen? Is this
Yeah, it was mostly, it was an
teachers are coming out of
undergrad.
retirement and saying, I need to take this class?
Well, that was so interesting. I mean, it was an undergrad class, but because it was in this big concert hall, it's hard to, it's not like we have somebody at the door keeping track. And,
Right.
I'd hear from, the women's basketball coach that, she was sitting in on it because she thought it'd be so helpful. Or faculty colleagues of mine would be like, I snuck in yesterday, great lecture. And I'm like, who am I lecturing to? But it kind of became this weird phenomenon on
Mm,
campus, right? With so many people taking this class.
crazy. Now, so you did this as an experiment, and then you've been continually doing it, and then you decided to launch a podcast and a course for people, which they can take, I think, for free right now. Is that right?
Yeah, so kind of what happened was that the class went totally viral on campus, but which I
Right.
didn't expect. But what I super didn't expect was for the class to go viral off campus, right? Like here I am
Mm,
just, professor doing my thing, and now the New York Times shows up and is like, "Oh my God, you're teaching this class to so many kids. A quarter of Yale students are learning about happiness. What's going on?" And so talk to the New York Times, but then it's the Today Show and NBC News and
yeah.
CBS News, and then international media. People writing about the class in like Croatian and Thai,
Right.
and it was just kind of crazy. So, but what that press made me realize was, this isn't just Yale students. I was framing this like, this is a mental health crisis among college students. Let me teach them. But what the press convinced me was like, lots of us are feeling like we're not flourishing right now. And,
Right.
and I think people were looking at these Yale kids of like, these kids are at Yale, they're 19, like their whole life is made. What do they need a class on happiness for? Like, give it to me.
It's so
Like,
simple. Yeah, they got simple. They just got to show up to class, and they have daddy's money or whatever paying them to go, and all this stuff, right?
yeah.
They
And
don't
so,
have
and
real
so
responsibility. It's fake, false responsibility at the moment.
And I think that's, that was what a lot of the coverage was like. And so
Mm,
it made us realize like this could really help a lot of people. And so we put it online totally for free on Coursera.org. It's called The Science of Wellbeing. You could take it
mhm.
now. But then we still got some emails and news articles that was like, I'm overwhelmed. My life is falling apart. I need a class on happiness, but I don't have time to take a class on happiness. Like, give me the Cliff Notes version. Like, I need it fast. And that's where the Happiness Lab podcast came in.
Yeah.
We realized that, as you know so well with this podcast, like there's so many folks who are looking for insights, looking for good stories, looking for ways to learn about what to do better. And so we decided to just kind of give all the insights that we've given in the class in kind of short podcast fun form.
It's amazing. Yeah, entertainment, so you can be entertained and learn and be educated. Now, I'm curious. People have been talking about happiness for in the last decade. I feel like I've seen lots of books out there. Gretchen Rubin's got an amazing book on happiness. There have been other, I guess, happiness educators, teachers, experts, whatever you want to call it, for over a decade. Why is this picking up in such with so much steam when happiness has been talked about for a decade? It seems like for me, in lots of different platforms.
Yeah, it's not entirely clear. I mean, one answer is like nothing's new about this, right? I mean, Harvard had a class on the science of happiness taught by this guy Tal Ben-Shahir over a decade ago. Also, Sean
Hmm.
Aker, another famous happiness
Yes.
researcher, was part of that class. And so, in some ways, like every time somebody does this, it kind of goes a little viral. We've been worried about happiness since I think since we've been human, right? Like basically,
Hmm.
chimpanzees aren't out there worried about happiness, but probably we are, right? It's in the Declaration of Independence. Like Aristotle was talking about eudaimonia back in the day. Like it's in some ways this is super not new. I
Hmm.
think what is new is that like a lot of us are focused on this right now because I think things are pretty good. Like on the internet there's this idea of like first world problems, right? And that's the
Yes.
problem that a lot of us face, right? Like we feel like we have food on our table, we have a roof over our head, we have good jobs and good families, great internet and Netflix, but something's missing. And like and that when you're feeling those first world problems, I think it's even more profound because you're like, everything's supposed to be fine, right? Everything's supposed to be perfect. Like, why do I not feel like everything's right? Why do I feel like I'm not flourishing?
Why do
And
we
I think,
feel that way?
well, I think the problem is that our mind kind of sucks. We have these really bad intuitions about what makes us happy. I mean, people who are in that state are also thinking, oh, if only I could be like that 19-year-old lottery winner, everything would be perfect, right? So people are doubling down. They're playing the lottery. They're spending more time at work. They're investing in all this stuff, thinking reasonably based on their intuitions, thinking it's going to improve happiness, but we're just going about it the wrong way. And that's why I think the class can be so powerful. It's not like we don't know what to do to be happier. We have these strong theories. It's just the science suggests they're wrong. Like it's not
Yeah.
like we're not putting the work in. We're putting the work in the wrong stuff.
So imagine, I mean, it sounds like you've had this experience with 1,000 different students you've worked with. Imagine a student right now is feeling so overwhelmed and so insecure about everything they do in their life. They're mentally struggling. They don't feel like they fit in with friends. They feel like they've got so much classwork and they're just struggling. And every day is a battle of how to find a joy in the smallest things, but they can't find any joy. Where does a kid like that start of actually being happy? Like, what's the even starting process when you're in that situation?
Yeah, well, I feel like step one is to just realize how not alone you are if you're in that
Yes.
situation. That's why I start this class with the stats, right? Like, oh, you feeling overwhelmed? Great. 87% of your college peers are feeling that way too. You know, feeling really depressed, like actually probably a quarter of you are admitting that you're feeling that way, right?
Wow.
Feeling overwhelmed, well, that's three-quarters of you. Like, and so I think seeing the
So
stats can be really
awareness,
powerful. Yeah.
awareness
And I
is,
think this is another spot where our mind lies to us. There's this wonderful study I share with the students in my class that has you predict how other people are feeling, right? Because we're constantly doing that. Like we're in our own heads feeling depressed and anxious or feeling inadequate. And then we project onto other people. And whenever we look at other people, we think they're doing fine. And so there's this one study that has college students predict how many good and bad events other people are going through. Like how many other people out there like got their dream job or got a perfect grade or got invited to a cool party versus bad things. Like how many people out there, you know, got dissed for a date or are feeling really homesick or something like that. And what you find is people consistently overestimate how many good things other people are getting. In other words, other people aren't doing as well as you think. But what's
mm,
worse is people really, really, really seriously underestimate the number of people that are going through bad things, like
right.
almost by double digits. And so the problem is like we're all kind of suffering in silence and in stigma, right? Because we don't want to admit like we're feeling like we're not flourishing, but everybody else seems great. But the fact of the matter is the data suggests that's just not the case. So that's kind of step one is like you are
Yeah.
not alone.
Okay. Step two.
Step two, I think, you know, not take the online class, right? You know, like you know, no, but seriously, I think that what science suggests is that there's ways to intervene in small ways in baby steps that can matter a lot.
Mm,
And one of those first steps the research suggests is to kind of reach out to other people. Is I think
mm-hmm.
this there's this kind of mistaken notion that happiness is all about self-care and self, like treat yourself, kind of Parks and Recs style. But what the science suggests is that happy people are really other oriented. You know, they're reaching out, they're making social connections, they're worrying about how they can help other people and other people's welfare. That's what seems to lead to a happy life, which is problematic because as we get stressed, especially as we get lonely, we end up turning inward. We become more like me focused, and it's kind of this
The
vicious
world is
cycle.
against me. No one understands me. All the bad things are happening to me. But when I'm hearing you say, and what I've been learning through my own experiences, when we actually get out of ourselves and say, how can I help someone else? How can I be a listening ear to someone else? How can I show up to someone's event and show that I'm supporting them? When we take it away from us to others, that's when we get our greater joy.
That's
Is that correct?
exactly right. Yeah. It's again, it goes against our intuitions, but doing nice
Yeah.
for others is better than maybe focusing on ourselves. One awesome study did this where they basically forced people to give money to others. So you walk up to somebody on the street and you're like, do you want some money? The people are like, yeah, give me some money. So you hand somebody $20 and you say, by the end of the day, either spend this on yourself. So that's a kind of treat yourself sort of condition. Or by the end of the day, spend this on somebody else.
Mm.
And you know, we could predict like what's going to feel better. Most people think, you know, treating yourself is going to feel better, but it turns out that at the end of that day the people who spent the money on someone else feel better.
I think, I mean, it's always fun, I guess, to get gifts, but I think it's way better to give the gift, you know, for a birthday or Christmas or whatever you want to celebrate. Just giving a gift to give it, to watch someone else light up is for me the greatest gift. It's more selfish to give because of what you gain from it, as opposed to just, okay, give me things all day long. Am I right, or is that
Well, no,
off
you're
there?
totally right, but it's not I mean, that's why you're such a happy guy, but I think it's not most people's intuition, right? I
I
think
mean,
most,
yeah.
like for me personally, I mean, I know all the data, but as I said, I'm not generally a happy person, which I think translates
Hmm.
to my intuitions aren't normally great. Like if I'm having a really crappy day, I'm like, I want to get a nice manicure for myself and treat myself. I'm not like, let me give a coworker a nice manicure gift card right
Mm.
now. But you're right. The data suggests I'm totally wrong. I'd be so much happier and I'd get so much more bang for my money buck in terms of happiness by spending it on other people rather than myself.
My entire, I would say, teens until now. Earlier in my life, I was very insecure and obsessed about what I wasn't getting. Once I started to shift into my teenage years and start to challenge myself by allowing myself to be rejected, the potential of being rejected by saying hi to people, or just being nice in the line of getting a coffee or whatever it may be, of just putting myself out there. It was always the fear of rejection and insecurity. Once I said, I'm just going to do this to give to people, and I'm going to be kind. I'm going to walk down the street and I'm going to smile and say hello, and I'm going to ask people questions. It was like everything started to shift and change because I became outgoing towards other people. And I try to look for, in every situation I can, how can I give to someone else? If I'm at Starbucks, how can I pay for someone for $5? If I'm in a grocery line and someone's struggling, how can I just help them and get something small? It doesn't have to be money, but just how can I show people that I am thinking about them, that I see them, that I acknowledge them. And I think when we come from that mindset of giving, we feel more fulfilled and happier because we realize we contributed to someone else's life. Again, with your example of money, it doesn't have to be money, but how can you contribute and bring joy to someone else? And that contagion of positivity will reflect back and make you feel that spark of joy as well. At least that's the way I feel.
Well, that's exactly what the science suggests. I mean, it doesn't have to be money. It can be time, or it can be a small amount of money. One thing about that study, they did different dollar amounts. So it wasn't always $20. Sometimes it was $5. And what they find is the amount of money doesn't matter. Like it can be an incredibly small amount of money and an incredibly small amount of time. It's the fact that you're doing something nice for somebody else and you recognize it.
Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being you're happy 100% of the time, where was your happiness level 5 years ago or 3-4 years ago before you got into this? Were you an 8, 5? What was it kind of like most of the time?
Yeah. Well, I actually have legit data on this, on and it is a 1 to 10 scale. And basically I was probably at a 6 maybe. And now I'm pretty consistently at a 7 or 8, which kind of makes sense. It's I think doing these practices, all the stuff we teach about in the class, from being other oriented to experiencing gratitude to mindfulness and all the stuff we talk about, it's not gonna it doesn't immediately change your life. So you go from 0 happiness to 1 million happiness. But
it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. Is that what you're telling me?
There's some stuff that happens overnight. I mean, if you have a really great exercise class, you feel immediately better. I bet even if you do the nice Starbucks thing, for that day, that's what the research suggests. For that whole day, you're feeling a higher
that day.
mood.
But it's the consistency every day. You've got to show up in order to rewire your brain, I'm hearing.
And this is the bad news about happiness, is that all good things, you have to continue to put the work in. It's it's like working out at the gym, right? You can't just go do your leg day one day and be I'm done, good. Legs are going to be great,
If you're looking for more greatness in your life, make sure to check out this video right here. And also check out our free PDF, The 3 Secrets to Unlock the Power of Your Mind to help you change your life. Download it right here.
But if it goes through the lens of who I am as this past story, this limitation, this person that tried to achieve it and failed,